The battlefield was quiet now. Too quiet. Once this place had shaken with the sound of explosions, the roars of engines, and the endless clash of two great alien armies. But that was days ago. Now the smoke was thin, the fires were dying, and the only sound was the wind moving across broken metal and shattered stone. Sirenia lay trapped under the remains of a collapsed wall. Her armor was cracked, the glowing lines across its surface dim with failing energy. She could feel blood seeping beneath the plates, sticky and heavy against her skin. Every breath came sharp like knives cutting into her chest. She had been fighting with her unit when the retreat was ordered. The Arakai soldiers had fallen back quickly, leaving behind only the wounded and the dead. She had called out to them. She had begged her brothers and sisters in arms to pull her free. But orders had been orders, and the Arakai were strict. Those who could not march were left behind. Her people believed it was better to die on the battlefield than to be carried like a child. So now she lay alone, half buried in rubble, staring up at the dull gray sky. She did not know if it was night or day anymore. The sun of this world was hidden by smoke and clouds. All she knew was the silence. Silence and pain. Sirenia was no stranger to pain. She had been trained from youth to fight, to endure, to wear the armor of her people and bring glory to her clan. The Arakai were tall, proud, and unbending. Weakness was not tolerated. Fear was something to be crushed. Compassion for the enemy was seen as foolish. But lying there, abandoned, she began to wonder if her people's pride had cost them something greater than honor. For all their strength, they had left her like trash on a broken battlefield, a soldier forgotten, a warrior discarded. Her vision blurred as she tried to lift her arm. The rubble pinned it down, too heavy for her fading strength. She coughed, a sharp taste of iron filling her mouth. Perhaps this was her end. Perhaps she would die nameless on this ruined world. Then through the haze of smoke she heard something. At first she thought it was a trick of her mind. A sound carried by memory, not reality. But then it came again, soft, steady, a crunch. The sound of footsteps on shattered stone. Someone was walking across the battlefield. Her heart quickened. Enemy scavengers? Mercenaries? Predators that fed on corpses? She forced her head to turn, though the effort made spots dance before her eyes. From the distance, a figure appeared. Not Arakai. Not one of the rival empire's soldiers. The shape was too small, too narrow, too fragile. It was a human. Sirenia almost laughed, though the sound came out as a broken cough. Of all the beings in the galaxy, a human was the last she expected to see here. Humans were new to the stars. Their fleets were tiny compared to the great empires. Their weapons looked primitive. Their technology was mocked by her people as clumsy and slow. The Arakai called them the Young Ones, a species barely crawling out of their home system. And yet here one was, walking calmly through a battlefield that even scavengers avoided. The human wore a patched coat over light armor, carrying a pack that looked far too heavy for his frame. His face was hidden beneath a visor, scratched and dirty, but his movements were steady. He was not afraid of the silence. He was searching. Sirenia tried to move, tried to reach for the weapon at her side, but her body betrayed her. All she could do was lie there, half hidden by rubble, watching as the human drew closer. The human stopped suddenly, scanning the ground. His head tilted as if he had heard her faint cough. Then he turned, and his eyes met hers. For a long moment neither moved. Sirenia expected him to lift his weapon to finish her off quickly. That was what most scavengers did with wounded soldiers. She was no prize, not anymore. But instead the human did something unexpected. He walked closer. Slowly, carefully, he set down his pack and crouched beside her. His visor shifted, clearing to reveal his face. He was older than she expected, with lines across his cheeks and a short beard. His eyes, though tired, were sharp. Still breathing, he muttered in his strange, harsh language, then louder so she could understand through her translator implant. "You're hurt." Sirenia blinked at him. "Leave me," she hissed, her voice ragged. "I am Arakai. My people will return for me." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Her people would not return. The human studied her for a moment. Then he shook his head. "Doesn't look like anyone's coming." He pressed his hand against the rubble, testing its weight. Then, with surprising strength for someone of his size, he began to push. The rocks shifted, groaning as they moved. Sirenia felt the pressure on her chest ease. What are you doing?" she demanded, anger mixing with confusion. Getting you out, he said simply. She stared at him. Why, you are human. My people call you weak, foolish. You gain nothing by saving me. The human grunted as he shoved another slab of stone aside. Maybe your people don't care, but I do. No one deserves to die like this. His words struck her harder than the rubble. Compassion. Mercy. These were not the ways of the Arakai, yet here was a human, a stranger, showing them without hesitation. Piece by piece he freed her from the ruins. At last, with one final heave, the last chunk of debris slid away. Serenia gasped as fresh air filled her lungs. Her body trembled with weakness, but she was no longer trapped. The human slid an arm beneath her shoulders, lifting her carefully. Easy, he murmured. You've lost a lot of blood. She wanted to push him away. Her pride screamed at her to reject his help, but her body had no strength left. Against her will, she leaned against him. For the first time since her people abandoned her, she did not feel alone. The human guided her toward a sheltered corner of the battlefield, where the twisted remains of a transport ship created a crude cover. Inside, he had built a small camp, a flickering heat lamp, a bedroll, and a few supplies. He laid her down gently and opened his pack, pulling out bandages and strange little tools. She watched in silence as he began to work. His hands were steady, careful, and he muttered to himself as he cleaned her wounds. Serenia could not understand him fully, but she recognized the tone, concern, determination. When he finally met her gaze again, he gave a small smile. Name's Elias, he said. Captain Elias Ward, and you're lucky I came by. Serenia stared at him, trying to find the words. At last she whispered, Why save me, human? I am your enemy, Elias shrugged. Doesn't matter. You're alive. That's enough reason for me. The fire inside the broken transport hummed softly, giving a faint glow that fought against the heavy shadows. The battlefield outside was still silent, but inside the camp, a fragile life had been pulled back from the edge of death. Serenia rested against a pile of worn blankets that Elias had placed beneath her. Her body still ached, her wounds still raw, but she could feel strength slowly returning. She did not know whether to be grateful or angry. Her people had abandoned her, left her beneath stone and steel to die. Yet here was a human, a stranger, a supposed enemy, who had risked his own safety to pull her out. He had fed her water drop by drop, cleaned her wounds with steady hands, and stayed awake through the night to make sure she kept breathing. For the proud Arakai warrior, it was confusing. And confusing things often felt dangerous. Elias sat across from her now, leaning against a broken beam. He was sharpening a small blade with careful strokes, the rasping sound steady. He seemed calm, almost too calm, as if caring for a wounded alien was an everyday task for him. Serenia studied him quietly. His armor was simple, patched in many places, not like the shining plates of her people. His pack was filled with tools, wires, strange human devices she did not understand. He was smaller than an Arakai, his body leaner, but there was something solid about him. He did not move like a weakling. He moved like someone who had learned to survive. At last she spoke, her voice rough. Why are you still here? Elias glanced up. Because you'd be dead if I wasn't. I mean, she pressed, her eyes narrowing. Why have you not left? You saved me from the rubble. You could have walked away then. Why stay? He set the blade aside, his expression thoughtful. Because you're not healed yet, and I don't leave people half-finished. Serenia frowned. You speak as if my life matters to you. It does, he said simply. Life matters. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Her chest tightened. Among the Arakai, such words would be seen as weakness, compassion for the enemy. Foolish, dangerous, yet Elias spoke them as if they were as natural as breathing. You are strange, she muttered. He chuckled. I've heard that before. The next few days passed in uneasy rhythm. Elias tended her wounds, made sure she ate the strange human rations he carried, and watched over the camp when she drifted in and out of sleep. At first, Serenia resisted everything. She refused food until he practically pressed it into her hand. She snapped at his attempts to speak, answering with short, sharp words. Her pride stung every time he adjusted her bandages or helped her sit up. To rely on a human, on anyone, was shame enough, but Elias never seemed offended. He let her anger wash over him like rain on stone. He spoke calmly, sometimes with a faint smile, sometimes with silence. Slowly, almost against her will, Serenia found her guard lowering. One evening, as the sky outside burned with the dim red of a distant sunset, Elias handed her a cup of water. She drank slowly, then asked, "Why are you here, human? Not here with me, but here on this battlefield." Elias leaned back, resting his arms on his knees. "I was a captain once. Small ship. Smuggling mostly, sometimes transport. Got caught in the wrong place when the war started. Lost my crew, lost my ship. Nope," he shrugged. "I picked through the ruins. Supplies, tech, whatever I can find. Trying to survive." Serenia studied him. There was pain hidden in his voice, though he tried to cover it with casual words. She recognized it. Loss. The kind of loss only war could bring. "And yet," she said softly, "you still choose to save others." His eyes met hers, sharp and steady. "Because if I stop saving, then I'm no different from the ones who abandoned you." The words struck deep. She turned away, unable to hold his gaze. That night she dreamed of her people. She saw them marching away, their banners high, their eyes hard. She called after them, begged them to return. But all she saw was their backs leaving her to the rubble. When she woke, Elias was there, stoking the small fire. He glanced at her, saw her trembling, and handed her a blanket without a word. She took it reluctantly, but the warmth soothed her shaking hands. Days turned into weeks. Serenia's strength returned slowly. With Elias's help, she learned to stand again, her legs weak at first but growing steadier. He taught her how to lean on the broken walls for support, how to move without reopening her wounds. They spoke more often now. Elias told her stories of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, of cities filled with light. She listened, half in disbelief, half in wonder. Humans lived so differently from the Arakai. Where her people prized only strength and discipline, humans seemed to prize curiosity, laughter, and stubbornness. She found herself asking questions, even when she did not mean to. "Why do your people explore the stars if they are so dangerous?" she asked one evening. Elias smiled faintly. "Because we have to know what's out there. Doesn't matter if it's dangerous. Curiosity's part of who we are." It was an answer that made no sense to her, yet it stirred something inside. A species that risked everything, not for conquest, not for honor, but for curiosity. Strange and maybe admirable, but not all was calm. One morning, while Elias was out searching the edges of the battlefield for supplies, Serenia heard voices. Rough, harsh voices speaking in a mix of languages. Scavengers. Her heart pounded as she pressed herself against the wall, listening. The men moved closer, their footsteps heavy. "Human's been seen around here," one said. "He's got something valuable, I can smell it." Another laughed. "Maybe more than that. Heard he's keeping some alien alive. Could be worth plenty if we catch her." Serenia's blood ran cold. They were hunting her. She reached for the weapon Elias had left by the bedroll. It was not her Arakai blade, but a human sidearm, small, unfamiliar, yet functional. Her hands shook as she held it. The scavengers drew nearer. She could hear their boots crunching just outside. Then suddenly Elias's voice rang out. "Looking for something?" There was a pause, then laughter. "Ward, thought you were dead." "Not yet," Elias said calmly. "Now walk away." "Or what? You'll shoot us?" "Heard you've got an alien hiding here. Bet her people would pay well for her. Or maybe they're enemies." Serenia's heart pounded. She wanted to rise, to fight, but her body still wasn't ready. All she could do was listen. There was the sound of weapons drawn. Then a crack, a shot fired, the scavengers cursed. Elias shouted, "Run!" Moments later, he dashed into the shelter, his arm bleeding from a grazing wound. He grabbed Serenia's hand. "We need to move, now." For the first time, Serenia leaned on him, not out of weakness, but out of choice. Together they fled the camp, slipping through the ruins as the scavengers shouted behind them. They found refuge in an old bunker, sealed tight from the outside. Elias collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, his wound dripping blood. Serenia tore fabric from her own tunic and pressed it to his arm. He winced but did not pull away. "You saved me again," she whispered. He gave a tired grin. "Guess we're even now," she shook her head. "No, you have given me more than I can repay." That night, as Elias rested, Serenia sat awake, watching the faint glow of the lamp. Her thoughts turned heavy. Her people had left her, but this human, this stranger, had risked everything to protect her again and again. Perhaps honor was not only found in strength. Perhaps it was found in kindness, in loyalty, in refusing to abandon another even when it cost everything. For the first time, Serenia wondered if the galaxy had underestimated humanity, and for the first time she wondered if she had too. The bunker was dark and smelled of rust and dust. Old machines lined the walls, broken beyond repair, their surfaces covered with years of grime. The air was cold, but at least it was safe. For now. Elias leaned back against the wall, his arm bound with strips of cloth. The wound was shallow, but it still bled. He breathed slowly, trying to hide his pain. Across from him, Serenia sat upright, her eyes fixed on the heavy door that sealed them inside. Her mind was restless. The scavengers outside had not given up. Their voices still echoed faintly through the ruins, searching for any sign of the human and his strange alien companion. Serenia had never felt so exposed. Once she had been part of a mighty army, her people's banners flying high, her armor shining with power. Now she was hiding in a broken bunker with a single human, hunted like prey, and yet, despite the danger, despite the fear, she felt something she had not felt since the war began. She felt alive. Elias stirred, breaking the silence. "They'll keep searching," he muttered. "Scavengers are like wolves. They smell weakness and circle until they find a way in." Serenia tilted her head. "And what do humans do when wolves come?" Elias gave a faint smile. "We fight back. But we fight smart." His words carried a quiet strength. He was not boasting, not pretending to be invincible. He was simply stating a truth. Serenia respected that. Over the next 2 days, they stayed hidden in the bunker. Elias worked tirelessly, setting up small traps and alarms made from scraps of wire, cans, and broken tech. Serenia watched him closely. He lacked the strength of her people, but his mind was sharp. Where the Arakai solved problems with force, Elias solved them with creativity. One evening, as he adjusted a small device near the entrance, Serenia asked, "Why do you trust me, human? I could betray you. I could call my people if they ever returned." Elias looked at her calmly. "Because you haven't, and I don't think you will." She frowned. "You know nothing of me." "I know enough," he replied. "You had the chance to leave me bleeding when those scavengers attacked. You didn't. That tells me more than any words could." His faith unsettled her. In the Arakai army, trust was earned through years of battle. But this human gave it freely, without hesitation. But danger was never far. On the third night, their alarms rattled softly. Elias froze. Serenia's hand instinctively reached for the weapon at her side. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Voices followed. "They're in here," one scavenger growled. "I told you. The humans hiding in the old bunker." Another laughed cruelly. "Then let's smoke them out." Serenia's pulse quickened. She looked to Elias. He met her gaze and gave a sharp nod. The scavengers tried to force the door, slamming it with heavy tools. The metal groaned but held firm. Then came the smell of smoke. Burning fuel poured through cracks. They were trying to flush them out. Serenia coughed, covering her mouth. Elias moved quickly, dragging old pipes and scrap to block the worst of the fumes. But it was only a matter of time. "We cannot stay here," Serenia rasped. Elias nodded grimly. "We fight our way out." The door shuddered, then burst open with a deafening crack. Smoke poured in, and with it came 3 scavengers, weapons drawn. Their faces were covered with masks, their eyes gleaming with greed. "There they are," one shouted. Before they could fire, Serenia moved. Her body was still weak, but her warrior training took over. She swung the human sidearm up and fired, the shot catching the lead scavenger in the shoulder. He stumbled back with a cry. Elias rushed forward, using the chaos. He slammed a broken pipe against another's arm, knocking the weapon free. The 2 men grappled, struggling against each other. The third scavenger lunged at Serenia. She twisted, pain shooting through her wounded side, but managed to kick him hard in the chest. He crashed into the wall, dazed. Together, Elias and Serenia drove them back, forcing them out of the bunker. The scavengers cursed as they retreated, leaving behind only the echo of their defeat. When the door slammed shut again, Serenia collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving. Elias sat beside her, his face streaked with sweat. "You fight well for someone half dead," he said with a faint grin. She gave him a sharp look, but then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was a rough, broken sound, but real. "And you fight well for a scavenger, Captain," he corrected, still smiling. After that battle, something changed between them. The walls of mistrust that had stood high began to crumble. Serenia no longer saw Elias as just a strange, stubborn human. She saw him as a partner, a fighter who had risked his life for hers not once but many times. In return, Elias no longer saw Serenia as just a wounded alien. He saw her as a warrior, proud and fierce, who had chosen to stand by his side, but outside forces continued to close in. Days later, a new threat appeared. Automated drones left behind from the war began to sweep the ruins. They were programmed to destroy anything that moved, whether soldier, scavenger, or survivor. The first drone came at dawn, its metal frame gliding silently across the rubble. Elias spotted it from a crack in the wall. "Machine," he whispered. "War relic. And it's armed." Serenia peered out beside him. The drone's weapons glowed faintly, ready to fire. Her heart clenched. In her condition, she could not outrun it. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. "We can't fight it head-on. Too much firepower." "Then what do we do?" Serenia asked. He glanced at her, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We outthink it." The drone crept closer, scanning the ruins with red beams of light. Elias waited, his breath steady. Then he moved, darting out from cover. The machine swiveled toward him, weapons rising. But before it could fire, Elias threw a metal scrap across the ground. The sound echoed loudly, drawing the drone's attention. Serenia understood instantly. She pulled herself up and fired at the pile of fuel cans Elias had dragged earlier. The blast erupted, flames leaping high. The shockwave sent the drone reeling. Elias dashed forward, climbed onto its back, and jammed his blade into the joint of its armor. Sparks flew as the machine convulsed. With a final shudder, it collapsed in a heap of smoking metal. When Elias returned, his face was streaked with soot, but his grin was wide. "Told you. Fight smart." Serenia's eyes softened. "Perhaps humans are not as weak as my people believed." He chuckled. "Took you long enough to notice?" That night, as they rested near the fire, Serenia stared at him for a long time. "Elias," she said slowly, "when I was trapped under the rubble, I thought my life was over. My people left me. But you—" Her voice faltered. He looked at her gently. "I couldn't leave you. That's not who I am." Her chest ached, but not from her wounds. It was something deeper, something she did not yet understand. Perhaps it was trust. Perhaps it was something more. But their trials were not over. Beyond the ruins, the scavengers still lurked, their anger growing, and more drones were awakening, drawn by the sounds of battle. Serenia and Elias knew they could not hide forever. The galaxy itself seemed to be closing in, testing the fragile bond between human and Arakai. And soon they would face a choice that would change them both forever. The ruins were no longer silent. Every day the sound of danger grew louder. Scavengers searching for them, drones sweeping the battlefield, machines stirring to life after long silence. The broken world felt less like a graveyard and more like a trap slowly closing around Elias and Serenia. Inside the bunker, the small fire burned low. Elias tightened the straps on his pack, checking each weapon and tool carefully. Serenia watched him from where she sat, her body stronger now than it had been weeks ago. The wounds that once left her helpless had begun to heal. Those scars marked her skin beneath the cracked armor. "You are preparing to leave," she said. It was not a question. Elias nodded. "We can't stay here. Too many eyes searching. If we keep hiding, it's only a matter of time before they find us." Serenia's jaw tightened. "Then where will we go?" "North," Elias said simply. "There's a ridge that leads to old caves. If we reach them, we'll have cover. From there, maybe we find a signal strong enough to reach someone." "Your people?" she asked. "Anyone who's willing to listen," he answered with a faint smile. For hours they prepared. Serenia tested her strength, lifting what little gear she could carry. Elias made her a crude walking staff from a metal pipe, wrapping it with cloth so her hands would not slip. She hated leaning on it, but it gave her the stability she needed. When the time came, they stepped into the gray morning. Smoke still drifted through the sky, and the air was heavy with the smell of burned metal. Every sound seemed louder than it should, every crunch of rubble, every gust of wind. They walked side by side. Elias moved carefully, scanning every shadow. Serenia moved slower, her pride still wounded by the weakness in her steps. But she forced herself onward. She would not be a burden. Not anymore. Hours passed as they climbed over broken walls and moved through twisted wreckage. Twice they saw drones in the distance, their red eyes scanning. Once they spotted a group of scavengers arguing over scraps of metal. Each time Elias guided Serenia into cover, waiting patiently until the danger passed. It was slow, exhausting work, but they pressed on. At last, as the sun dipped behind clouds, they reached the ridge. The caves loomed above dark mouths in the rock. Relief stirred in Serenia's chest. Perhaps for once they had escaped, but as they began to climb, the sharp whine of engines filled the air. Elias froze. Serenia looked up sharply. Across the ridge, 3 drones appeared, their frames gleaming with cold metal. Behind them, more shapes moved, scavengers guided by the machines. "They found us," Elias whispered. Serenia's blood ran cold. The machines spread out, blocking the path to the caves. The scavengers raised weapons, their voices filled with cruel laughter. "Well, well," one shouted. "The human and his little pet alien. Thought you could hide forever?" Elias raised his weapon, his eyes steady. "Stay behind me," he told Serenia. But Serenia shook her head. "No, not this time." The fight exploded in chaos. The first drone fired, beams scorching the ground where Elias had stood a moment earlier. He rolled aside, returning fire with sharp bursts. Sparks flew as his shot struck the machine, but its armor held firm. Serenia gripped her staff and the small sidearm Elias had given her. She limped forward, aiming carefully. Her shot caught one scavenger in the leg, sending him sprawling with a scream. The other scavengers cursed and opened fire. Bullets sparked against stone, forcing Elias and Serenia to dive behind cover. "We cannot fight them all," Serenia shouted. Elias's eyes burned with determination. "We don't need to fight them all. We just need to survive." Together they moved. Elias fired at the drones, drawing their attention. Serenia used the distraction to strike at the scavengers, her movements clumsy but fierce. Her staff cracked against one's helmet, sending him crashing to the ground, but more kept coming. The drones advanced, their weapons glowing hotter. The scavengers pressed forward, shouting. Elias ducked behind a wall, his breath ragged. "Serenia, we need to retreat into the caves." She shook her head, her chest heaving. "If we turn our backs, they will cut us down. We must stand. Then we make a choice," Elias said grimly. "We fight with everything we have." The battle raged on. Elias's rifle grew hot in his hands as he fired shot after shot. Serenia fought with desperate strength, each swing of her staff carrying the weight of her pride and her will to live. Together they held the line, their bodies moving in a rhythm that felt almost natural. For a moment, Serenia felt something she had not felt since her days in the army. She felt the bond of fighting beside someone she could trust, not because of orders, not because of duty, but because Elias had chosen her and she had chosen him. But their strength was fading. Elias's rifle clicked empty. Serenia's arms trembled with exhaustion. The scavengers closed in and the drones loomed larger, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Serenia's mind raced. She thought of her people who had left her. She thought of Elias who had stayed. And she realized something. Her people had abandoned her because they believed survival without honor was meaningless. But Elias had shown her the truth. Survival was not shameful. Survival was hope. She clenched her jaw. If they had to fall, they would fall together. But she would not abandon him. Then in the distance, a sound broke through the chaos. Engines. Not the cold whine of drones, but the roar of ships. Elias looked up sharply. Over the ridge, 3 human shuttles descended, their hulls marked with the symbols of a neutral colony. They fired bursts of energy, scattering the scavengers and driving back the drones. The battlefield shook as the shuttles landed. Doors opened and armed humans poured out, forming a defensive line. Their leader shouted, "Captain Ward!" "We received your signal." Elias blinked in shock. "I didn't send a signal." Serenia looked at the device strapped to his belt. It glowed faintly. The broken transmitter he had been tinkering with for weeks must have finally worked. The scavengers fled, dragging their wounded. The drones retreated, their programming confused by the sudden show of force. Within minutes, the battlefield was silent again. Elias sank to his knees, exhausted. Serenia stood beside him, her staff trembling in her grip. The human soldiers approached. Their leader saluted Elias, then glanced at Serenia with suspicion. "And who is this?" Elias met Serenia's eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elias said firmly, "She's with me. She's under my protection." The soldiers hesitated, but at last nodded. As they were guided aboard the shuttle, Serenia's thoughts swirled. She had expected to die on this world, abandoned by her own kind. Instead, she had been saved not once but again and again by a human who refused to let her go. Now she faced a choice. She could cling to her people's pride, their belief that she was already dead, or she could walk into the unknown, beside the one who had given her a second life. She looked at Elias, who sat beside her, his eyes weary but still burning with that strange human stubbornness. The choice was clear. For the first time, Serenia chose survival. Not as defeat, but as hope. The shuttle doors closed with a heavy clang, sealing out the smoke and broken battlefield behind them. For a moment, Serenia simply stood leaning on her staff, as the engines roared and the craft lifted into the gray skies. Her heart pounded, not from the battle, but from the strangeness of what was happening. She was no longer crawling through ruins with Elias, no longer clinging to life in the shadows. Now she sat among humans, strangers who eyed her with suspicion, hands near their weapons. She understood their looks. She was not one of them. Her armor was foreign, her body scarred with marks of a different war. She was, in their eyes, the enemy, and yet Elias sat beside her, calm and steady, his presence like a shield. Every time a soldier's gaze lingered on her too long, Elias's sharp eyes met theirs, silently warning them. She is with me. The shuttle rattled as it climbed higher. Elias leaned back, closing his eyes for the first time in days. His exhaustion showed in the lines on his face, the stiffness of his movements. Still, he kept one hand close to the weapon strapped to his leg. Serenia watched him quietly. In her mind, she replayed every moment since they had met. The way he had found her broken body, the way he had carried her when she could not stand, the way he had fought beside her against machines and scavengers alike. Her people had abandoned her. Elias never had. When the shuttle docked with a larger vessel in orbit, Serenia braced herself. The human ship was vast, metal corridors stretching like veins of light. Soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, voices crisp as they gave reports. The commander of the vessel, a tall woman with gray eyes, met Elias at the docking bay. "Captain Ward," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "We thought you lost." "Nearly was," Elias replied. He gestured toward Serenia. "I wasn't alone." The commander's eyes hardened as they fell on Serenia. "And what is she?" Elias's voice carried no hesitation. "She's my ally, my responsibility." The commander studied Serenia for a long moment, then gave a short nod. "Very well. But she will be watched." Serenia's pride bristled, but she held her tongue. She had lived long enough among humans to understand. Trust was not given easily. It had to be earned. Days passed aboard the ship. Serenia remained close to Elias, though she kept her distance from the others. The human crew treated her with caution, whispering when they thought she could not hear. Some looked at her with fear, others with anger. She spent her time in silence, watching, learning. Humans were strange. They laughed easily, even in dark times. They argued fiercely, yet stood united when danger loomed. And though many distrusted her, none treated Elias as anything less than one of their own. It was Elias who began to bridge the gap. He made her sit with him in the mess hall. He introduced her to the engineers, explaining her knowledge of alien technology could help them repair damaged systems. Slowly, a few humans began to see her not as a threat, but as someone who could contribute. One night, in the quiet of the observation deck, Serenia stood alone, staring at the stars. The endless void stretched before her, beautiful and terrifying. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. A warrior scarred, abandoned, and yet alive. "You're thinking too much again." Elias's voice came from behind her. She turned, surprised he had joined her. He stood with his hands in his pockets, tired but smiling faintly. "I wonder," she said softly, "if my people know I live, and if they would even care." Elias stepped beside her, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Then let them wonder. You're still here. That's what matters." Serenia's throat tightened. For so long, she had believed survival without her people was meaningless. But standing here beside Elias, she realized she had been wrong. Survival was the beginning of something greater. Their fragile peace did not last long. Alarms blared one morning. Red lights flashing through the corridors. The commander's voice rang over the speakers. "Enemy ships incoming." All hands to battle stations. Serenia felt her chest tighten. She recognized the pattern of the ships on the display. They were hers, her people's fleet. The humans scrambled to their stations. Elias grabbed his gear and turned to Serenia. Stay close. If they board, this ship will turn into a battlefield. But Serenia's mind was far away. Her people were here. They would see her alive. They would know she had survived. And yet, a hollow ache grew in her chest. Would they welcome her back? Or condemn her for surviving when they had left her to die? The first clash was brutal. Enemy fire struck the human vessel, shaking it with thunderous force. The crew fought back with disciplined precision, firing beams of light into the black void. But the enemy had numbers. Their ship swarmed like a tide, relentless and overwhelming. Elias led a squad to reinforce the hangar. Serenia went with him, staff and weapon in hand. When the enemy breached, spilling into the corridors, she met them head-on. Her people, her kin. Their eyes widened as they saw her. One warrior froze mid-strike, his voice breaking in disbelief. Serenia, you live? She struck his weapon aside, her heart twisting. Yes, I live. Confusion rippled through the attackers. But orders were orders, and they pressed forward. Serenia fought with everything she had, each blow carrying both fury and sorrow. Elias was beside her, his rifle steady, his presence unshakable. The battle raged for hours. The ship groaned under the strain, systems failing one after another. In the command center, the gray-eyed commander made a desperate decision. We can't hold much longer. If reinforcements don't come, we'll be destroyed. Serenia overheard, her blood running cold. She knew the truth. Her people would not stop until the humans were ashes, unless someone made them stop. She turned to Elias, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. I can end this, he frowned. What are you talking about? They still know my name, my face. If they see me alive, standing with you, they will hesitate. Maybe enough for your commander to strike back. Elias's eyes darkened. Or maybe they'll kill you where you stand. Maybe, she admitted. But I will not hide any longer. I choose to fight. The plan was reckless, dangerous. Elias hated it. But in the end, he trusted her choice. With the commander's permission, Serenia and Elias broadcast a message across the enemy fleet. Her face appeared on every screen, scarred but unbroken. To my people, she began, her voice strong. You left me to die. You believed I was too weak to survive. Yet here I stand, alive, stronger than before. And I stand not alone, but with those you call enemies. Her words echoed through the void. Silence followed, heavy and uncertain. Elias stepped into view, standing beside her. You want war? Fine, but know this, humans don't abandon their own. We fight and we survive together. The reaction was chaos. Some enemy ships faltered, refusing to fire. Others pressed on, bound by command. But the hesitation was enough. The human vessel launched a desperate counterattack, striking at weakened lines. Enemy ships broke apart, scattered by confusion. Within hours, the tide shifted. The humans held. At last, the enemy retreated, leaving behind silence and wreckage. In the aftermath, Serenia stood on the deck, her chest heaving with exhaustion. The commander approached, eyes softer now. You may have just saved us, she said. Perhaps you are not the enemy we thought. Serenia inclined her head. I am not theirs anymore. My place is here. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and sure. Then welcome home. The days that followed were filled with repairs and rebuilding. Trust did not come overnight, but slowly Serenia earned it. She trained with the soldiers, shared her knowledge of alien tactics, and fought beside them in skirmishes. And though whispers still lingered, more and more humans began to see her not as a stranger, but as an ally. One evening, as the ship drifted through quiet stars, Elias and Serenia stood together at the observation deck. She looked at him, her voice low. Do you think they will come again? Of course, Elias said. Wars don't end in a day. Then we will fight, she said firmly. He smiled faintly. Together, Serenia nodded. For the first time in her life, she felt not abandoned, not wounded, but whole. Not because of her people, but because of the human who had found her when no one else would.